Dillon Gabriel's continued place at the top of the Browns' depth chart may have more to do with connections than competence. The leaked footage of Shedeur Sanders confronting Kevin Stefanski isn't just a spontaneous blow-up. It's the boiling point of a pattern shaped by favoritism and hidden conflict of interest. Stefanski shared agency ties with Gabriel, combined with prior college affiliations, paint a troubling picture of decisions being made behind closed doors.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
Sanders' outburst was less about frustration and more about demanding merit over politics, and his timing on camera stripped away the usual deniability. Favoritism may be an open secret in sports, but when it begins to shape public trust and player development, it becomes a crisis. This incident has exposed a roster structure built not on performance, but on protection. Sanders forced the issue into the open, and now, the Browns can no longer pretend it's just about competition. The viral footage of Shedeur Sanders confronting Kevin Stefanski during practice didn't just go public. It blew the doors off a locker room that's been suffocating under silence and favoritism. It wasn't an outburst. It wasn't some rookie getting ahead of himself. It was a calculated, calm confrontation, one that revealed just how deep the dysfunction runs inside the Cleveland Browns organization. Shedeur wasn't just asking about a play call. He was asking why a team with a 2-7 record was still pretending he didn't exist, why his reps were limited, why the offensive strategy felt like it was being built around failure, why, after months of work, he still had no clarity on his future. And the answer from Stefanski was avoidance, deflection, zero accountability. And when that moment hit social media, it was over for Cleveland's carefully managed silence. For months, they've operated behind a veil. PR reps assigned to monitor Shedeur's presence, internal media deliberately steering clear his name, and Stefanski refusing to acknowledge him in any meaningful way during public appearances. This wasn't accidental. This was intentional marginalization. The goal? Suppress his growing confidence and media presence after he had the nerve to say what everyone was thinking, that he was ready to play. That one interview, that one statement of self-belief, it triggered a full organizational lockdown. Suddenly Shedeur was too loud, too visible, too confident. And the solution wasn't mentorship or honest evaluation. It was containment. Keep him quiet, keep him sidelined, and keep pretending he's not in the room. But now the room's walls are see-through. The footage makes everything explicit. Stefanski isn't just uncomfortable, he's defensive. He sidesteps the questions. He avoids direct responses. It's a masterclass in passive resistance. Because when control is your main priority, clarity is dangerous. And Shedeur was demanding clarity. In front of teammates. In front of coaches. In front of anyone who could hear. And now, in front of the world. This wasn't a single spark. It was a result of a long, slow burn. Because Shedeur has been dealing with this since college. Passed over by the NFL across multiple rounds. Not because of talent, but because of optics. Because of the narrative attached to his last name. The shadow of his father's prominence. The constant assumptions that confidence equals entitlement. The league's discomfort with any quarterback who doesn't come prepackaged as humble and quiet. Shedeur doesn't fit that mold. He's confident, vocal, proud. He shows up ready to lead, not to beg. And that energy? It's viewed as disruptive by teams that value control more than potential. In Cleveland, that control shows up in all the expected ways, starting with their unwavering commitment to Dillon Gabriel, a quarterback with flat numbers, minimal results, and no real upside so far. Yet, somehow, he's untouchable, despite the losing record, despite the stalled offense, despite every sign that a change is desperately needed. And that brings us to the deeper issue, conflict of interest. Gabriel shares a background with Stefanski's previous collegiate coaching network. More notably, he shares the same agent. That's not speculation. That's context. That's the kind of behind-the-scenes alignment that warps decision-making. Because when relationships take precedence over merit, the roster becomes a political chessboard instead of a merit-based team. That's why Shedeur hasn't been given a real shot. Not because he lacks preparation, Not because he isn't ready, but because putting him on the field threatens the structure that's been keeping other people safe. And everyone sees it. The players, they're not blind. They watch Shedeur grind. They watch him ask questions, stay focused, and take the high road, despite being actively shut out. That kind of behavior earns respect, not just pity, because in every locker room, players know who the real leaders are. And when one of those leaders is deliberately silenced, it fractures everything. Culture matters. And right now, Cleveland's culture is leaking. What's even more damning is the Browns' refusal to own any of it. Since the video dropped, there's been no real acknowledgement, no course correction, no shift in how the team is speaking about its quarterbacks. They're hoping the news cycle moves on, that fans forget, that Shedeur fades back into background. But that's not happening, because social media doesn't forget. It amplifies. And this story touches a nerve. It's about race, yes. It's about power. It's about silence. It's about what happens when a young black quarterback shows up prepared, confident, and unwilling to let outdated expectations limit his voice. And that's the part the Browns can't PR their way around. You can't assign enough media reps to hide the fact that a team with a losing record is actively suppressing a quarterback who wants to compete. You can't avoid saying his name and still claim you're developing him. You can't pretend strategy is the reason he's not playing, when the real reason is favoritism and fear. At this point, Shedeur has a choice to make. Stay and keep fighting a system that's made it clear it doesn't want to change, or walk away, reclaim his agency, and find a franchise that values talent over connections. And based on what we've seen from him, that decision isn't about emotion. It's about principle. He's not chasing clout. He's not begging for reps. He's asking for fairness. And that alone threatens the entire fragile foundation the Browns have built this season on. Because once you admit Shedeur deserves a shot, you have to admit you've been denying him one. And that admission, that's what Cleveland's trying to avoid. But it's too late. The locker room knows. The media knows. The fans know. Every week that passes with Shedeur benched and Gabriel under-delivering is another week of credibility lost. At some point, this stops being about one quarterback room and becomes a referendum on the entire organization. Because if they're willing to suppress this kind of talent for this long, what else are they mishandling? What other decisions are being shaped by relationships instead of results? And how long can a team survive when its most promising player is also its most silenced? Shedeur hasn't just exposed a rift. He's exposed a pattern. The NFL has long had a problem with confident black quarterbacks who don't conform. It's systemic. And Cleveland, whether they intended to or not, became the latest case study. By trying to erase Shedeur's presence, they ended up spotlighting the very issue they were hoping to avoid. Now, every decision from here on out will be judged through that lens. Every press conference, every depth chart update, every play on the field. There's no going back. So what's next? That's the question hanging over the entire league now. Does Shedeur stay and push through the silence, hoping the team finally recognizes what they have? Or does he leave and let another team, one without the baggage, build something real around him? Either way, his stock is rising. Not because of hype, not because of name recognition, but because he stood up, asked for answers, and refused to let the silence win. If you've been following this situation, drop your thoughts below. Should Shedeur stay in Cleveland or demand a trade? What does this say about the NFL's player development systems? Like if you're tired of seeing teams protect mediocrity and suppress talent, subscribe to stay updated. We'll be tracking every snap, every roster move, and every uncomfortable truth that comes next. Because Shedeur isn't backing down. And now, neither are we. The Browns have a crisis they can't spin their way out of. And for once, the footage didn't just leak. It spoke louder than any press conference ever could. What we're watching is a breaking point, not just for Shedeur Sanders, but for the entire Cleveland organization. It's the moment the mask slipped, the moment the curated narrative. We're developing him. He's learning behind the scenes. We have a plan, collapsed under the weight of its own hypocrisy. Because you don't assign PR reps to babysit a developmental player. You don't ban internal media from saying his name if you truly believe he's part of the future. You don't sidestep questions, sense of visibility, and then act shocked when the player finally demands transparency. The confrontation we all saw wasn't out of line. It wasn't even heated by NFL standards. It was composed, direct, and most importantly, it was justified. Shedeur asked the questions any player in his position would ask if they weren't being gaslit by the very people who claim to be coaching them. And Stefanski's response? Telling. No leadership. No engagement. Just evasion. Like Shedeur's voice didn't belong in the room. But it does belong. And that's what makes this all so ugly. This isn't about talent. This is about control. It's about a franchise that's so deeply entangled in its own insecurities that it would rather alienate a quarterback with real upside than risk disrupting its internal politics. Let's talk about the guy who is getting the reps, Dillon Gabriel. Gabriel's tenure as QB1 in Cleveland has been forgettable at best, dismal at worst. His numbers aren't improving. The offense isn't moving. And the locker room chemistry? Let's just say it's deteriorating fast. And yet, he remains protected. Coddled, unchallenged. Why? Because the connections run deep. Shared agents. Overlapping college affiliations. It's not about what's happening on the field. It's about who knows who off of it. That's not development. That's favoritism. That's organizational cowardice dressed up as strategy. And it's that favoritism that's costing them more than just games. It's costing them credibility. Let's be honest. NFL players talk. They know when one of their own is being silenced. They know when the front office is playing politics. And when that starts happening, you lose the locker room. Guys stop buying in. They stop trusting leadership. And the team becomes fractured in ways you can't fix with a closed-door meeting and a team dinner. So now the Browns are in a lose-lose situation of their own making. They spent months downplaying Shedeur's presence, trying to convince the public, and maybe themselves that he's not quite ready. But now the footage proves otherwise. He is ready. He's vocal. He's confident. He's asking the right questions. And he's doing all of that while being systematically shut out. And it's not just disrespectful, it's dangerous. Because the longer they keep pretending that Shedeur is not a factor, the more exposed they become. This isn't speculation anymore. It's on video. It's in the team's own performance record. It's in the player's body language. Every time Gabriel throws an interception, every time the offense goes 3 and out, every time the coaching staff gives the same empty answers, it reinforces what that clip already told us. Shedeur isn't the problem. The problem is the fear of what happens if they let him succeed. Because if Shedeur goes out there and balls out, if he puts points on the board and breathes life into a flatline team, then everything Cleveland's been doing becomes indefensible. The silencing, the PR surveillance, the selective naming, the refusal to answer questions about his future. All of it becomes a stain on the organization that no win-loss record can clean up. And here's where it gets even more uncomfortable. This isn't just about Cleveland. This is a mirror held up to the NFL at large. The league has a long history of discomfort with confident, outspoken black quarterbacks, especially those who come with a legacy name. It's not about talent. It's about compliance. It's about being palatable. And Shedeur, he challenges that, not through controversy, not through drama, but by standing tall and refusing to dim himself just to make the room more comfortable. And that's threatening to a system built on silence and submission. So now the Browns are at a crossroads. Do they keep clinging to the same tired structure that's already failed them for 9 straight weeks? Or do they finally acknowledge what's been obvious for months and give Shedeur the keys? Because make no mistake, he's not going to wait forever. There are teams out there right now watching this unfold. Teams that don't have quarterback politics clogging up the depth chart. Teams that would welcome a leader like Shedeur with open arms. Teams that value production over pedigree and growth over gatekeeping. If Cleveland doesn't move soon, they're going to lose him. And when they do, it'll be their own doing. They'll lose a quarterback who's earned his shot not just with talent, but with poise under pressure, with patience in the face of silencing, with composure in the middle of an orchestrated campaign to diminish him. And when Shedeur walks into a different facility and gets treated with respect, When he puts up numbers on a team that actually wants him to succeed, that success won't just be his. It'll be a reminder, every single week, of what Cleveland refused to see. That's the cost of silence. That's the price of control. And the Browns are about to pay in full. This footage didn't just go viral. It exposed a culture, a system of favoritism, conflict of interest, and racial double standards that's far too common and rarely called out this clearly. And now there's no hiding it. If you followed this story from the beginning, you know this isn't just a one-time blow-up. It's a breaking point built on months of quiet disrespect, a slow, systematic effort to mute a quarterback who had the audacity to be prepared and unafraid to say it. And now the Browns are left with two options: embrace the truth and make the change, or cling to the lie and lose everything worth saving. So, where does Shedeur go from here? That's the question that's got the entire league buzzing. Because whether he stays and fights or walks and flourishes, one thing's for sure: he won't be ignored again. And now the spotlight won't move. Because this is one of those controversies that fades away once the next game kicks off. This isn't a sideline scuffle that gets smoothed over with a half-hearted team statement and a few edited highlight reels. What happened between Shedeur Sanders and Kevin Stefanski didn't just spark a conversation. It exposed one that's been simmering for far too long. Everyone's watching. Not just fans. Not just media. The entire league is watching what Cleveland does next. And so far, they're doing what they've always done: stall, downplay, deflect. But that approach doesn't work anymore. Because now there's a 2-7 record sitting behind it. And a quarterback controversy that's no longer a quiet internal dilemma. It's an open wound bleeding onto every snap, every stat line, every media appearance. Let's talk about what's really at stake here. Shedeur Sanders wasn't just another name on the depth chart. He was the Browns' escape hatch. The one person who could have turned this season into something salvageable. Maybe not a playoff run, but a direction. A sign that the franchise had the guts to pivot when it mattered. That they weren't afraid to embrace potential over protection. But instead of leaning into that hope, they suppressed it. Because in Cleveland, comfort comes first. Familiarity gets favored. And change? Change is a threat that gets locked in the film room, monitored by PR reps, and conveniently never mentioned by name in public. The franchise chose silence over opportunity. And now they're stuck in that silence while the house burns down around them. Dylan Gabriel. Still QB1. Still underperforming, still shielded. The offense still dragging. The losses still piling up. And Shedeur still standing on the sideline, calm but visibly fed up, while the world asks the question Cleveland refuses to answer. What are you so afraid of? Because when you strip away the excuses, what's left is fear. Fear of accountability. Fear of being proven wrong. Fear that Shedeur will step onto that field and immediately show everyone just how much time they wasted trying to hide him. And let's be honest, that's not just a Stefanski problem. That's a systemic NFL problem. The league has always had a bias when it comes to players who challenge its power structures. Especially young black quarterbacks who don't know their place, who don't stay quiet, who don't wait for permission to be great. The second Shedeur publicly said he was ready to play, the franchise moved to mute him. That wasn't a coincidence. That was a calculated reaction. Because in this system, confidence without permission is treated like rebellion. And that's what makes this story so uncomfortable for the league. Because Shedeur didn't get here by writing his father's name. He got here by working, by showing up early, studying the playbook, doing reps, keeping his head down, even as he was being boxed out. And when he finally did speak, he didn't make it personal. He asked direct, honest questions about his role, about his growth, about his future. And instead of getting answers, he got stonewalled. That's why this story won't go away. Because it's not about ego. It's about equity. It's about a young quarterback asking for what he's earned and being treated like a problem instead of a professional. And now, Cleveland has a decision to make. They can keep pretending none of this matters. Keep rolling out the same tired press lines. Keep Gabriel in the starting slot, hoping that somehow the numbers turn around, even though every sign points to a team that's flatlined. Or they can own it. Admit they mishandled this situation. Admit they underestimated the fan base. Admit they silenced a player who deserved more. And then, finally, make the change that should have happened weeks ago. But that would take guts. And so far, this franchise hasn't shown it has any. Which means the only bold move left is in Shedeur's hands. He's got every reason to walk. Every reason to demand a trade. To say, I gave you everything, work, patience, respect, and you gave me silence. There are at least 5 franchises right now that would make room for him in a heartbeat. Franchises that aren't scared of players with presence. Franchises that don't treat leadership like a liability. And if he leaves, the Browns won't just lose a quarterback. They'll lose their credibility. Because no matter how this plays out, Shedeur's story is now part of the broader narrative about how this league treats young, black, confident leaders who won't conform to outdated expectations. And that story, it's spreading across locker rooms, across front offices, across every fan base that's ever watched their team protect mediocrity while ignoring momentum. Shedeur is the momentum. And the Browns have been doing everything they can to act like he's not even on the field. But the world saw that footage. They saw him stand up. They saw him ask hard questions. They saw him refuse to be erased. And now, the clock's ticking. The next few weeks will define not just Shedeur's career, but the Browns' legacy. Because if they bench Gabriel and finally give Shedeur a real shot, it'll look like what it is, a correction. A forced, reluctant pivot made under pressure. And if they don't, then they'll be remembered for exactly what they become. A franchise more committed to preserving pride than pursuing progress. So what happens now? Shedeur has a future. There's no doubt about that. The question is whether it's in Cleveland or anywhere else. And for once, the choice isn't up to a coach or a GM or a media narrative. It's up to him, because they tried to erase his name from the conversation. Now it is the conversation. If you've made it this far, you already know this isn't just about football. This is about power, about politics, about who gets to speak up and who gets shut down. It's about what happens when someone refuses to let their voice be silenced, even when the entire system is built to keep them quiet. Let us know where you stand. Should Shedeur stay and take this fight to the field? Or should he move on and let another team invest in what Cleveland refused to see? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit like if you're tired of watching teams bury players who deserve better. And subscribe, because if this story's taught us anything, it's that the real game isn't always played on Sundays. Sometimes it's played in silence. And Shedeur, he just broke it.